Okay, so we were able to get a lot of the folks over from the last one. So we're up to 93. There's gonna be a number of folks I imagine that don't make it in. I hope that they'll be able to find a way. But what we will do is post this recording to the AFWERX SBIR page at the end of this for anybody who couldn't make it. And of course, we'll be continuing to answer questions via the contact email that is in the solicitation too. But I do want to get started. And also, I'll announce now that let's see, stop the recording and restart it here in a second. This call will be recorded. So just please be aware of that. And if you have anything that you don't want stated out loud, don't type it into the Q&A window because we will be reading those aloud as we go through this. Here, just one more second. All right, so let's go through some ROEs first. So this call is being recorded, and as I mentioned, it'll be posted to afwerx.af.mil/sbir.html. Actually, let me fix this real quick. Some rules of engagement, though, on this is that if you have questions, post them into the Q&A. We're going to go through and answer those both in written format as we're going through this presentation, and then we'll be reading them out loud and then answering verbally as well. And then let's do some quick introductions. So we've only got 2 folks on our team today. Let's see, let's start with you, Joe. You mind doing a quick intro? You might be muted, Jay. While he's getting set up, we'll start with James Coleraine.
Hey, this is James Coleraine, calling from SBIR side.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And then Joey, if you want to try again for the intro. Okay, no worries. So we've got Joey from the AFWERX and Air Force Ventures side as well. Myself, Captain Steve Lawver, I work with Air Force Ventures and AFWERX, and one of the PMs on this SBIR direct to phase 2. So first off, if you go to afwerx.af.mil, which is our homepage, and you hover over for industry, you'll see a SBIR open topic as one of the links. That's going to take you to a page, afwerx.af.mil/html or /SBIR.html. If you want to bookmark that, you can. Any new webinars or postings that we put from this one will be put there. And that's where you can find the sign up link for the next one as well. We are discussing one SBIR topic today, and that is AF20.R as in Romeo -DCS01. This is a direct to phase 2 topic only. There's not a phase 1 associated with that. Really quickly, how you get to the instructions on this. If you go to what is called, we call this the DSIP portal, but if you go into any search engine and you search SBIR portal, it should be your first hit. And it stands for Defense SBIR STTR Innovation Portal. The first page that you get through there does require a login, but if you look in the top right, you can go look at the topics and the instructions without first creating an account. When it comes time to submit, you will actually need to set up your account. Once you have clicked topic, you can scroll down and you're going to notice DARPA, Air Force, and this is in the current screenshot, but also Navy. These are all the active SBIR topics that are live right now. When you click that Air Force tab, you're going to notice the X20.R solicitation. That is your source document. That is your instructions on how to propose against this particular direct to phase 2 SBIR. And that's got everything. So from what are we evaluating you on? What are the expectations that we have for you to put in your proposal? What are our expectations in terms of timelines for feedback and awards and things like that? So definitely look at that. One key to point out here is that whenever we post amendments, so if we make changes throughout based on information we realized was inconsistent or should be added, or there's new templates that we provided, we will post amendments. And you can see one of them on the screen there, X20.R Amendment 1. We actually have 2 of them that are on the live site now. Make sure you're reading all of the amendments to ensure that you have the most recent information. There is also the attachments section. And so that is for things like the customer memorandum template, which we will talk about probably ad nauseum today, the fund matching form, which we'll also speak to, and then the COVID-19 areas of interest. I want to point out here that this is not a COVID-19 specific topic. This is an open topic for any dual use solution, which means that it has both a commercial application that's non-defense and a potential Air Force application. But we do have focus areas underneath it for COVID-19, which are just saying, hey, this is something that we are interested in attacking right now because it's affecting us across the world, right? So I want to get that out of the way. It's not just COVID-19. This call is not targeted towards COVID-19 topics. We do put on a call on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. If you go to the AFWERX website, you'll notice in the top there's a yellow link that says COVID-19 response. That is where you can find all current information on that. But on the left side of the screen, you'll notice that all the open topics have the timelines posted. So this one went live on March 30th. You could start submitting against it on April 8th, and then it closes on April 30th at noon Eastern time. We will not accept late proposals. One piece of advice there is if everybody's getting on at the same time, which often happens as we get closer to close, it tends to slow down the site. So I recommend starting early, and then I would recommend finishing early and not waiting until the last day to actually upload your response, because that's one of those things where even for just a slow loading site, we aren't able to take those late proposals. All right, if the other way that you can find this information is if you go to beta.sam.gov. This is what's called a government point of entry. For any and all contract opportunities for the government are posted here. And so in the main search window, if you select contract opportunities and search for X20.R SBIR, then you will get one result, which is this solicitation that we're talking about today. So two ways to get to the same information, both through the DSIP portal and through beta.sam.gov. Now we'll do a very high level, and then we'll get into the details and Q&A. So here's a quick look. It is up to a $1 million funding opportunity that is funded by SBIR. Small Business Innovative Research Program has been around for a long time, for decades now, that is meant to fund small businesses doing innovative research. And each of the services has their own pot of money that is associated with SBIR. A number of agencies also have this as well. So this is just one of the topics we've created within the Air Force to execute on those dollars. So up to $1 million coming from SBIR. And again, it's not only for COVID-19 related solutions. I just want to foot stomp that. The eligibility requirements. So you must be a US owned and controlled small business concern, which means less than 500 employees, including any affiliates. And then the full eligibility instructions are found at that link. So actually, Joey or James, if you guys wouldn't mind just copying that link over into the chat to make it easier for folks to access, that would be great. But it talks about things like how we, again, the details around the 500 employees and being affiliates. It talks about ownership and control. What does that mean? Both the US side and then also things like venture capital, hedge funds, et cetera. So read through those if you have any concerns there. Again, the solicitation closes on April 30th at 12 p.m. Eastern time. All right. One of the premises behind this program is that for you to create something and develop something that the Air Force customer actually wants, and that doesn't end up sitting on a shelf, because we make the assumption, which I hope is valid, that you all actually want deal flow here. You don't want just R&D funding to build something and then stop working on it, right? So we are definitely targeting those who are trying to sell their solution at the end of the day into something that we call, which is phase 3. But it's this idea that your solution is now operationally benefiting some user in the Air Force. We very much want that to happen. And so we start with a very broad funnel where we say, if you have any any dual use solution, which again is you have an Air Force application potentially, and some type of non-defense application, you can apply through this topic. And so the result is we get lots and lots of proposals, and we actually select a good number as well. Now, within that though, that is typically in phase 1, which we're skipping here. I'm just giving you some context. Because this is a direct to phase 2, we are making the assumption that you have accomplished the feasibility study that is normally done in phase 1 on your own. And there'll come a point during the proposal that you can document that information. But what normally would happen in phase 1 is, this is just typical numbers, up to $50,000 in 90 days to perform a feasibility study, where one of the elements of that feasibility study is understanding intimately the needs of your Air Force customer, right? So when it comes to phase 2, or in this case, direct to phase 2, which skips phase 1, we have this document called a customer memorandum. Now it is described in the solicitation. I do want you to read through it and definitely reference the solicitation, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. And we also have as an attachment on the solicitation the template document that we want you to use. And so this document is meant to capture the interest from the Air Force customer. It has information on who they are, why they're interested in your solution, and then it gets to the granular level detail of, if the solution is funded for phase 2, what are those SBIR funds of up to $1 million going to be used for? And it breaks it down by deliverable. the exact things that you're going to deliver to your Air Force customer using the money from SBIR. There's some other information that we ask for in there. For instance, the transition strategy. So we recognize that this is not committing the Air Force to doing anything with you after phase 2 is complete. But we do want to know that both you and your Air Force customer are thinking about what success looks like. So once phase 2 is complete, what is the next step? How are you going to move to operationalize this technology, this solution, such that it's making an impact in some way for the warfighter? So that customer memorandum is a requirement to have that signed by both your end user, who operationally benefits from the solution in the Air Force, and your customer. And the distinction here is that the customer is whoever is responsible for acquiring that solution on behalf of the end user. So that's kind of the key. We define that in the customer memorandum itself, but I wanted to point that out here. This is a requirement to be able to apply for this direct to phase 2 topic, even for those who are addressing COVID-19. We get that question a lot. Regardless of what topic area you're addressing, you need to have the customer memorandum. A couple notes. This is actually carryover from the last call that I wanted to address first. The first one was we did release a new version of the customer memorandum this round. And in fact, it came out earlier this week. And so there was some time where the old version was still on the street. What we have decided amongst ourselves is that we will accept the old version, but there's two differences that I need to point out because they have a very substantial impact on the way that we move forward. So again, we will accept the 19.3 related customer memorandum that was previously posted to the DSIP site as an attachment. It has since been replaced. But here's two things I want you to address with your Air Force customer before you propose. One is the matching fund rules are different between the two, right? So I want to point out here that whatever the solicitation says, that is your source document. So the solicitation says and used to say and will continue to say that any matching funding that comes from an Air Force customer, so money that comes from them to add on top of your phase 2, on top of that up to $1 million from us, which we can execute on their behalf, any of those matching funds must be received by our team within 30 days of the close of solicitation. So that means on April 30th, the clock starts ticking for 30 days for all that money to get sent over to us to be able to award and execute those funds. What the old memorandum said was no later than 90 days after the contract award. That is not the case. It's not what's in the solicitation. I just want to be absolutely sure that both you and your Air Force customer are not blindsided by that. So here's my request. If you are going to use your old customer memorandum, you don't want to, first off, the best solution is if it's low enough friction, get them to just re-sign with the new template. That's the easiest option here. It's best for us, and I think it's best for you. But if that is too time-consuming or inconvenient, and you already have your 19.3 template signed, then what you can do is just add an addendum that is signed by your POC, your Air Force customer, that says everything in the other memorandum applies, but we recognize that we must send any matching funds within 30 days of the close of solicitation. So that's piece one. We need that addendum as part of this. The second change, this is a little bit less impactful, but if you go look at the attachment, which is that schedule of milestones we ask you to come up with your Air Force customer, the old version, the 19.3 version, which we replaced, said that you needed 2 sets of milestones if there was any matching funding, right? And the reason was that we wanted to know what would happen if your money did not come in on time, aka those 90-day window that we talked about. Now that we accept it within 30 days, or we require it within 30 days of close, we're not going to award any of these direct to phase 2s without that money being there. So there is no need to have 2 sets of milestones, one for if the money comes in, one for if the money doesn't. Period dot, we need the money, so we're not going to award without it. So you only need 1 set of milestones that does account for if the money does arrive. I want to point out that matching funds are not required. So this discussion is around any of those Air Force customers that wanted to provide matching funding as part of this phase 2. So that was that. And then we also said in the old version, up to 10 milestones. The reality is it's at the maximum of 15 milestones in the current version. So that's not as big of a thing. But long story short is if you already had the old one signed, just get us an addendum from your Air Force customer that's signed that just says, we recognize these changes and we're still okay with that in conjunction with the old memorandum. So long answer to what I think was an important question. We're going to post what I just discussed as an addendum on the solicitation, but I wanted to get this out there now. The other question we had received, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, where are you posting the MOU as well?
So the MOU is already posted. So if you go to DSIP, again, where we looked at, I'll show you right now. See the attachments that are at the bottom there and the customer memorandum template? That is that document.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay. The other thing is, there was a question that we received around what percentage must be accomplished. So the proposed total of all consultant fees, facility leases or usage fees, and other subcontract or purchase agreements may not exceed either 1/3 or was it 1/2 of the total contract price or cost. And so we had a good question that said, hey, this solicitation says actually two different things in two different spots. In one spot, it says 1/2, and in another spot, when it's discussing in the cost volume subcontracts, it was 1/3. We did confirm that the answer is 1/2, and it should be that way across the entire solicitation. So again, we're going to post an amendment that updates just that one item in the cost volume that says 1/2 is the answer to that. Look for that coming soon, but I wanted to make you aware now. And this is something that comes directly from the policy directive, which governs the things that we do. So you can just search SBIR policy directive and see some of the rules around this. It's a public document. And that talks about where for phase 1, which is where that came from, was the 1/3 item. But for phase 2, it is 1/2. And we confirmed that. Thank you for the team that brought that up. That was very helpful. We will be posting an amendment to that. So those are the two items. That was very in the weeds. Sorry to jump in so quick. But now what I want to do is open it up for any questions. Actually, first off, Joey or James, anything that you wanted to tag on to the things that I've said before we get started?
I'm good.
Same.
All right, let's do some Q&A.
Sure. Section 5.2, page 19. It isn't clear exactly where the phase 1 feasibility study should appear. Is it an appendix to volume 2 or a part of volume 5? Thanks.
Yeah, this is a really good question. Let me pull that up right now because we discussed this a bit as well. So the bottom line with this is, again, we're asking you to say, because we're not doing a phase 1 with you, have you accomplished on your own the items that would be in one of those feasibility studies, right? And so the question is around, do we have this in volume 2, which is your technical volume, that up to 15 pages, that is one of the requirements in your proposal, or is this a supporting document in volume 5? And off the top of my head, I don't want to tell you something wrong, so I'm pulling that up right now to give you guidance. So just give me 1 second while I pull that up. These are good questions. I guess I should expect no less. And if you want, you can read the next question while I'm finding this one, and I'll just provide an answer.
Sure, and actually kind of on that same portion, it's talking, we got another question saying, RE, the phase 1 feasibility study, does it get included in volume 5 and also include a shorter results summary into the tech volume?
Yeah, really good question. So yes, that is the exact same question. All right, so to be clear here, when you're looking at the solicitation, you can see, so as an example, if you're on page 21 that's talking about proposal content, and you see under technical volume, it says white paper not to exceed 15 pages, and it goes through each of those items, right? Table of contents, glossary, technical summary. Part of that technical summary is your phase 1 feasibility study results. So yes, that is where you have, a short kind of recap of what you did in that phase 1 feasibility study in lieu of having gone through phase 1 itself. Now, I'm going to read through the actual long-form technical summary on that discussion. So the item here says identification and significance of the problem or opportunity. And then it says briefly describe the specific problem opportunity addressed in the feasibility study and its relationship to phase 2. And I think there was somewhere, here we go. Stand by. So again, if you get to page 24, it breaks down as part of the technical volume, the phase 1 feasibility study results. So that's good. It's talking about the things that you need to mention there, which is great. Things like what exploration methods did you use to find your Air Force customer? Who is your empowered and committed Air Force end users? Who are the customers? Again, we differentiated who operationally benefits and who is the acquirer. If there's any other non-government end users that are relevant. And then the customer memorandum we talked about is mandatory. I'm trying to find the point at which that makes it seem confusing that we might need it in volume 5 as well. Yeah, so here's my request. I don't want to derail the conversation on this. We've already clarified that this does need to be addressed in your technical volume because it specifically says that. As to whether a longer form version of this needs to make it into the volume 5, my request would be the person who asked the question, just let me know what page number you're looking at so we're not dragging out the search for that, and I can answer other questions. And once we get to that, I'll make sure to address it. But again, really good question.
Do technical data right assertions only apply to non-commercial computer software?
Non-commercial. So good point. One of the things that you're going to do when you apply for this is essentially assert data rights beforehand. These are the things that you paid for out of your own pocket that are not being accomplished during the course of phase 2. So those things are not what becomes subject to the 20 years, for example, government purpose rights that are part of the generic data rights that apply here. It is the things that you're developing during the course of this phase 2. And so the answer is kind of, it depends. If it's something that you already developed on your own expense, then one, I'll point this almost every question. Read the solicitation. It talks about the rules around the government purpose, those government data rights that are conferred by SBIR. But realize that if you didn't develop it during phase 2, it might not necessarily be covered by those rights.
Can you confirm that life cycle certification is due at time of award, not at time of proposal submission?
So that's one of the optional items for us to have. So keep that in mind, but let me pull that up. Life cycle certification. Okay, all SBIR phase 2 awardees must complete a certification document award prior to receipt of more than half of the total contract's award amount and before the final payment receipt. So again, this is before you've received more than half of the total contract award amount. Okay, so as opposed to prior to award. Let me find if there's somewhere else that references that though. That one seems like it's pretty clear that you don't need it at the time of awards. It's something that has extra rules around what time that needs to be received by. So, good question.
Registration requirements ask for a DoD SBIR sitter ID. Where can I attain this ID? I have the other registration components needed, DUNS, CAGE, SBA, etc.
This is a question I have to take to John McCanny, who's our SBIR Center of Excellence POC, who's not on today. I don't know. Some of the things that I'm not able to provide really good answers on are because I don't see it from the side of the customer going through the portal and the process. So that's a really good question. Can you read it one more time so I can write that down and we'll get a follow-up?
Yeah, let me pull it up right here.
Thanks.
Steve, what I'll do is I'll just put follow-up in the notes.
Great. Okay. That's ideal. Yeah, then no need to read that one again. We'll get a follow-up on that. Great question.
Copy that. All right. Hi, we are not a historic Air Force contractor. How do we connect with an Air Force customer in this short time frame?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, even before I launch into the answer is, yes, there is a short time frame for this 20.R, but this is something that we do 3 cycles a year. And in fact, 20.R is an out-of-cycle solicitation. So the next one is going to be 20.2, which goes into pre-release in May. It opens in June and it closes in very early July. What you'll notice in 20.2 is that there is both a phase 1 and a phase 2, or rather direct to phase 2 mentioned in the solicitation, or at least that is the expectation. Obviously, once that's live, you actually got to read through the instructions in the solicitation. But I just want to say in general that phase 1, again, it has more of an expectation that you won't know who exactly your customer is going into phase 1, that we don't require that same customer memorandum that we do for phase 2 or for direct to phase 2 in this case. So if you don't have it by April 30th, that's fine. You can go through and propose for the next cycle, which will include your phase 1 as well. And some of the things that we offer during phase 1 are putting on events to help to convene Air Force customers with those solutions, and then just training that occurs every week over the course of 3 months on how to do that. So phase 1 might be better suited to you. In general, though, this is a good chance for me to foot stomp something that does cause issues that we've been told to address in any opportunity we have. And that is, don't cold call senior leaders unless you have a personal relationship with them. I won't stop you from doing that. But if you're just looking up information for a general or an SES who's like a civilian equivalent that works for a certain mission area or function, don't just email them. Because what's going to happen is one of 2 things. Either they will be kind of put off by the fact that you reached out to them directly, or they're going to pass that down to their team, who then is going to get the extra work piled on them. And so that has tended to create some kind of externalities and negative impacts throughout this process that affect other companies too. So please do not do that. It's resulted in some issues. But there are other ways you can go about doing this. There are a number of organizations that exist for the sole purpose of working with small businesses that are attempting to work with the Air Force. And so, there are organizations called PTACs, PTAC, which Procurement Technical Assistance Centers is what that stands for. So if you Google PTAC, you'll find information on that. There are small business representatives. So if you just you search Air Force small business, one of the first hits you're going to see is going to be to the website that talks about many of these opportunities that are available to you. And there are organizations and individuals whose job is to help with this kind of thing, right? Now, outside of the context of phase one, I think that's the best kind of guidance that I can give. And then again, if you do choose to apply for phase one come 20.2, there's a lot more hands-on experience that occurs during the course of phase one.
Are there any consequences of any portion of our product coming from overseas?
Yeah, really good question. So this is not black and white. What I would do is you can kind of control F through the solicitation, things like foreign, things like supply chain, and see what it has on discussing that topic. But again, it's not black and white. What is going to happen is if there are if there's foreign work that is proposed, foreign subcontracting that is proposed, or elements of your supply chain that are notably coming from these other nation sources, then during the course of the contract negotiations, that's going to be a one-on-one discussion that occurs. And there are things like assessment of risk in individuals and what is the role of that part or that person in the overall effort. It is not black and white, but it can have an impact. We just can't predict ahead of time what that would be. I also think this is a good time to point out that ITAR are the restrictions around governing these technologies that might be sensitive or relevant to the U.S. government or some national security interest, and how they are controlled in terms of their overseas or other national use. So ITAR rules are discussed in the solicitation as well, but this is not an ITAR, like most topics within SBIR are specific. This one is not. And so just based on the topic, before you could make an assessment that said anyone that submits to this specific topic is going to be ITAR controlled or subject to the rules of ITAR. We cannot do that here. And so that assessment is made during the evaluation and the negotiation and contract award part of this. So anyway, search through the solicitation to see the full rules around ITAR. And then I'm sure there are a lot of resources that are out there just in general about this, because it's not just for SBIR. This is a rule that affects really any company.
Hey, Steve, I want to say thanks for that great explanation there. And I do want to tack on, hey, that does apply if you even have like foreign software developers. So again, this will be a part of the conversation of, hey, if you're bringing foreign work in, that's something we'll discuss during contract negotiation. So just be clear and transparent about it in your application process.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Is there a minimum period of performance, i.e. can we have a 6-month contract?
So I don't believe that a minimum period of performance is mentioned. This is something we can search through right now. And again, this will be something where if it is not mentioned in the solicitation, then it's not a limitation. Yep. And so what we say is just the direct to phase 2 contract period of performance is up to 27 months, including 24 months for technical and 3 months for reporting. But nowhere does it say, to make sure to be absolutely sure, maximum. Yep. No minimum is stated. Good question.
The CSO describes how the Air Force will pay for development costs of a project, but then will receive a royalty-free license to the Air Force for ongoing use of resulting software. My company uses a cloud-based SaaS software that is fully developed and commercialized. How does the Air Force SBIR program and SBIR 20.R in particular accommodate SaaS models with periodic ongoing payments for cloud-based software rather than custom-built software installed on Air Force servers?
So that's a really good question. 2 things here. One of them is I want to note that this is, a small business innovation or innovative research. So there are definitions in, the policy directive within the SBA on what is innovation research. What we cannot do is fund innovation services. So if you are truly just providing a service, that is something where that wouldn't be relevant to SBIR funding. That said, there can be a research element to how do we adapt an existing SaaS platform to be able to be useful to the needs of an Air Force customer. That can be considered that innovation research. So realize there's some nuance there. But I want to be clear about that. We can't just pay for services for the type of things that we're doing with this. Now, how do data rights apply there? Frankly, I'm not an expert on that. I don't want to give you any misinformation there. But I do want to say, again, when you go into this, you assert data rights. So read the sections in the solicitation that specifically address that. And I think there's a lot of discussion that is there on that. But it talks about how do you say, hey, this is something I developed at my own expense before going through this program. So I don't want it to be subject to the same rules of those things that I developed during the program. And that those need to be asserted beforehand. Again, that's in the solicitation for the full rules.
Kindly point us to IP rights, or how is IP protected?
Yeah, let me give you the right section, just since this question's coming up a little bit. Rights. Okay, so if you go to page 34, there's a section on technical data right assertions. So rights and technical data, including software developed under the terms of any contract resulting from the solicitation, generally rests with the contractor. And then it goes for the full instructions there. It also talks about restrictive data legends that need to occur within the DFARS, and it lists some specific references there. Please do follow through on any references to find additional information. It talks about upon the expiration of the 20-year protection, then the government has unlimited rights in the SBIR data. So, again, this is not an area that I'm an expert on, but I really do want you to actually dig in to those DFARS references on the specific rules around this. And if still after doing that you have questions, there are points in this solicitation that talk about who to reach out to if you have questions on that. And so let me see exactly what we want you to do with that. Okay. So you'll notice on the very first page, page 1, it says for Air Force SBIR and STTR program questions, contact the Air Force Help Desk. And then there's a phone number and there's also an email, which is afsbir-sttr-info@us.af.mil. These types of questions are well suited for them as well. So please do send an email there with any specifics after you've read through the solicitation fully and followed any of those references that might apply.
Got a couple questions kind of asking the same thing. Will SBIR 20.2 allow COVID-specific topics as well, or is this COVID restricted only to this out-of-cycle solicitation?
That's a really good question. So I can't speak to what will or will not make it into the 20.2. I guess just my high-level intent is that this problem won't go away immediately, and so I think it would be, we can make an assumption that it'll still be something we care about. Again, I can't speak to whether or not it actually makes it into the solicitation.
Copy. We have already done phase 1, phase 2, and phase 2B. So can we just reference those for the tech feasibility study instead of writing writing justifying it?
So it kind of depends, right? It depends if you've done that for an open topic in the past. So there's just a couple things to talk about here. If you did that within the open topic construct, like this one is, then when you look at feasibility, the things we're specifically asking for aren't exactly the same as what might be done for other topics. And so no, it doesn't automatically fulfill that requirement. But if it was in the context of the open topic and some of those things are addressed, the other thing too is just realize that you cannot be awarded twice for what is known as essentially equivalent work. So if you're saying I did this thing once, in reference to another topic, and I even did a phase 2 and a phase 2B on top of that, and then you're applying for a direct to phase 2, just make sure that they are not essentially equivalent, for which the definition is in the solicitation. But it's essentially trying to say we can't pay you twice for the same thing, and there are risks involved there that can be treated as fraud, or it is fraud if it occurs. So just be very sensitive about that. I don't think that's what you were claiming that you were going to do, but just something for everyone to be aware of. In general, though, if you think that the work you had done previously addressed all those items that are discussed, I mean, really at the end of the day, what we hold you to will be what is in the solicitation. And if the items that we ask for as it relates to the phase 1 feasibility study results are covered by the things that you've done before, bring those up, absolutely. I just want to, don't automatically copy and paste and assume all the right things will be there.
If we match the $1 million with VC, do we have to write milestones and payment schedule for 2 million or just the 1 million AFWERX funding?
Really, really good question. So the answer there is just the 1 million. And this is a good chance. I'm going to bring up, give me a second to search for this while we're talking. There is a fund matching document that is one of the attachments on the solicitation as well that talks about some of the things that we need. So I'm going to reference that right here. And we'll talk through that. But in general, here's kind of the high level. If any money is going to be sent to us and the SBIR Center of Excellence who award the contracts to award the phase twos, then that money needs to make it into your deliverable list and the amount of money that's allocated against that in your attachment for the customer memorandum. If it's private matching funding, we're not privy to your contract, your agreement with that investor. We don't need a list of deliverables that are occurring there. That is what you are doing with them. We just ask you to confirm that it is occurring. Like, we want to see that there's a private investment that has occurred. And we actually have specific expectations that we talk about in the solicitation as it results to any matching funding. So yes, in this example you asked about, it would be 1 million because that is the Air Force contribution to that SBIR phase 2. And I'm pulling this up now, so you can go to the next question, and I'll get in some more detail once we get it open.
Yeah, I'm going to come in with a couple other matching questions. It says for the X20R, how heavy is the weight given for any government matching funds since they're not required?
Yeah, so that's something, I mean, I absolutely can't give on this call because it'd be discussing our evaluation paradigm. What I can do is say, you know, section 6.0 is the evaluation criteria. And you'll note that that commercialization potential is one of those that specifically references things like commitments of other funding. So I can just say it's one of our criteria. I can't tell you about weighting or any specifics associated with that.
And then another is, if is the payment amount column necessary in the milestone schedule if we do not have matching funds?
Payment amount. It is, because realize, so this is in discussion, or this is discussing the customer memorandum attachment 1, which is your milestone schedule. And it has a column there that is for the payment amount. We also want to know how much of the SBIR funds are you putting towards each of those deliverables. So absolutely, it still needs to be there. All I was saying was that if you are bringing in government matching funding to be awarded on top of the up to $1 million of SBIR funds, all of those must be, you know, represented in your milestone schedule to include the breakout of both SBIR funding. So which things are you using SBIR funds for, and which things are you using your government matching funding for? We need that broken out as well, described in your milestones. Real quick, let me tag on to, so if you look at section 5.5 in the solicitation that discusses the government and private matching funds, to those who are asking about private funds, there is an additional private cost match reporting requirement. And just says that the phase 2 final report shall include a brief description in whatever company format makes sense, discussing the investor fund's expenditure in support of the project. So that'll be an extra requirement that we have during the course of phase 2. And there's another one. Here we go. If you go to section 9.0, phase 2 voluntary matching funds guidance. So we took the opportunity to foot stomp everywhere that it is voluntary for matching, but it is a criteria, again, according to section 6.0. It goes into pretty good detail on who counts for matching, what is the timing and logistics associated with that. And then the other document that I wanted to go down to was Air Force fund matching form. Again, this is one of the attachments on the solicitation that you can find at DSIP and Beta SAM. I've got the document open right now, and it breaks down, for instance, for government matching, who is the organization, who's the POC, how much money are they providing, and then what is the color and fiscal year of the funds. Real quick, color of funds refers to what can that money be spent on legally. For private matching, we ask for who's the organization, what's their account or their contact information, the POC, how much funding, and then what type of investment is it? You know, is it a actual equity investment? Is it pre-sales? Is it something different? And then we do ask for private funding, even though we don't want to be in that deliverable, that milestone schedule, everything you're doing with your matching funding, that shouldn't be there. We do ask for in this fund matching form, and that number 7 is private funding work plan summary. So a brief statement describing the project portion that the investor will fund, i.e., you know, what is that investment going towards and how does it relate in some way to the research that's being proposed under this SBIR project? So kind of a long answer on that, sorry.
Yeah, it looks like you just answered one of the questions for another, which was, we have a U.S. Air Force customer that's interested in matching. Does the color of money matter? He wants to use 36 and 3080 funding. Really
good question. So this is something where, you know, this is built on a commercial solutions opening, which is the type of solicitation vehicle. It provides some flexibility in the color of money in this case, but both really the key here is that your FM or rather the Air Force customer's FM who is providing the money. So that financial manager needs to agree with the use of the funds. And that's part of the reason we ask you to break out on those deliverables, what is each of these funds being used for? So we can make an assessment of, in this example, is 3080 money okay with the specific thing that it is paying for? So there's some flexibility there overall, but we still need concurrence from your financial manager that that is okay. And that's one of the reasons that when you fill out a customer memorandum that does have matching funds, we want the FM's contact information there. And again, in that fund matching form that we just talked about, so that we can have those conversations real time. You might be muted, Cal. Or, sorry, James.
Yeah. Any clarification on the 20 years plus extensions on data rights mentioned in solicitation versus the SBA rule?
Oh, that was the thing we were going to look up. Stand by on that. I'm going to try to get an answer before the end of this call. We addressed the first two questions we had outstanding, but that was the third. So thank you for reminding me that. You can go on to the next one and I'll get an answer.
Can we combine a topic submitted to X20.1 with a closely related topic on COVID-19 into a single proposal?
It's a related topic. So I don't necessarily know what you mean by combined topics here. So the reality is this is a single topic that has its own instructions that are associated with that. Now, if it happens that you are solving two needs related to two separate solicitations with a single solution, you can apply to both, but realize again, you can't be paid twice for essentially equivalent work. So when you propose, there's an opportunity for you to tell us during that proposal process that you have also proposed against a similar solicitation with a similar solution, right? And so make sure that you're making that known. And then if it ends up that you're selected for both, great, but you only can pick one to be paid for. If the discussion is around teaming or things like that, i.e., can you find whoever that customer is that sponsored the other topic, can they be your Air Force customer that signs your customer memorandum? Yeah, sure. The answer is yes to that. But just realize you can't use other SBIR funding as matching. So if it's another SBIR topic in another agency or service, then no, you cannot use that as leverage to count towards matching.
Can pending government acquisition of an existing defense product that will be proposed to be enhanced with an existing commercial product count as government cost share?
Cost share. So I think I get the nature of the question here. Actually, can you read the first part again? Because I'm about to go down a trail that might not be scratching the itch.
Can pending government acquisition of an existing defense product that would be proposed to be enhanced with an existing commercial product count as government cost share?
Good question. And so my answer for that is if it complies with the actual letter of the solicitation, then it would be okay, right? And so there's multiple sections that I want you to look at. So 9.0, which has the fund matching guidance, look at that. And then any other references to the matching. I mean, in general, the funding needs to arrive in some manner to us to be able to execute in the case of the government funds. And so if the timelines can match up for that, and the use case matches up, it's not essentially equivalent, all these different things line up, then that might be okay. And so again, I would just treat it as if it doesn't say that you can't do it in the solicitation, and it fits the requirements that we do levy on matching, then off the top of my head, it should be okay.
To clarify for X20.R, if additional Air Force funds are obtained, will those funds be matched on top of the total amount asked through the SBIR funds? For example, if the SBIR request is for $1 million, Air Force partner has 100 grand, will the SBIR funds also match the Air Force partner's 100 for a total budget of 1.1 million?
So the answer to that is that it is up to 1 million from SBIR period dot. So regardless of how much either private or government funding is matched against that. So it's 1 million from us maximum period. But if the question is, for the government funds, does it add on top of the SBIR funds? The answer is yes. So if that government customer provided $100,000 as matching that was sent to us according to the instructions in the solicitation, we could award a phase 2 for 1.1 million, a maximum of 1.1 million.
If we submit for Project X under X20.R and also separately for a different COVID-19 project Y under X20.R, are we only allowed to be paid by AFWERX for one of them, not both?
I mean, the answer is, again, if you're being paid for the same thing, the answer is no, because it would qualify as essentially equivalent work, which again would be a fraud kind of situation. Now, if you're saying they're different solutions that are addressing things that happen to be related to COVID-19, then that's okay. You know, it's kind of on you to make that assessment of, are you proposing for essentially equivalent work that you're going to be paid twice for. So there's nothing that says you can't propose for multiple AFWERX or Air Force Ventures opportunities. Again, just be very clear when you are proposing that you're also proposing for those other efforts. And that will help to avoid us, you know, getting any sticky situations or you guys getting in those situations.
Another question, what if we just raised money before we got awarded? Can we use it to match SBIR, or it has to happen always only after the award?
It's a really good question. Let me address this one specifically from the solicitation again, because it defines when the eligibility window is for matching. Tell you what, go on to the next one while I'm searching for this, if you don't mind.
Sure. Our company has a product will require eventual FDA approval. Though we will not be using these funds for clinical trials, does this grant support commercialization efforts for products that will have clinical trials going on in parallel?
Trials, commercialization efforts. Read that one again, I'm sorry.
Sure. Our company has a product that will require eventual FDA approval. Though we will not be using these funds for clinical trials, does this grant support commercialization efforts for products that will have clinical trials going on in parallel?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And first I want to clarify, this isn't a grant. This is specifically a contract. So make sure when you're registering the various systems that you're able to receive contracts and not just grants. So I know that wasn't the question, but I heard that in there too. And then the question of, can you be awarded this SBIR if you will ultimately need FDA approvals, clinical trials, etc., if you're not actually doing those trials during the course of this SBIR? And the answer is yes. One of the things you'll notice is kind of reticent to leave this part of the page here. Let me see. It's animal testing. Actually, recombinant. So there's a section 3.17 and 4.9 that talks about you know, what are the rules, or actually that's for DNA, but 3.16 is human subjects, 3.17 is DNA molecules, and then 3.15 is animal subjects. But there's rules around that. So I'll give you an example for human subjects. All research involving human subjects shall be conducted in accordance with, list the rules, number of rules, protected, where's the thing that I'm trying to look for here? Maybe it's the next section. Okay. The key here is that it talks about you must have any approvals before the actual work is accomplished that would require those approvals. So it doesn't preclude you from being awarded the phase 2. It does preclude you from starting or being paid for any work that does require any special approvals that are related to human subjects or animal subjects or recombinant DNA testing. So make sure you're reading through those sections. 4.7 is the one that I'm looking at here for the full details. And to your question specifically, the fact that at some point you're going to need FDA approvals or something similar doesn't preclude you from doing this commercialization related SBIR. Just look at the specific work that you're asking to do under the phase 2, and that can help you to make the assessment of, is this something I'm going to need during the course of this or not? There's also a point during the proposal process where you specifically ask the question, or you answer the question, are you proposing work that involves researching human subjects, animal subjects, or recombinant DNA? When you select yes, that's going to trigger us to need to ask for additional information during the negotiation and award process. Okay, so I was also able to find, if you go down to page 45, in the discussion of when does the private matching funds, when can they be received? So it says the investment can occur anytime after the pre-release date of direct to phase 2 and no later than 90 days after award. So we're talking private investment only. But if that investment occurred after pre-release, which for us, you saw that this went live on March 30th, that is the date that would be used there. And then it must be received, and we need confirmation that you've received this within 90 days of your phase 2 award. So those are the rules for the timelines around private investment eligibility.
What controls or privacy is enforced around information included in the proposal submissions?
Yeah, so it is actually, Joey, you have the science kind of tech speak for this relating to IL4, FOUO, PII. Would you mind tagging on, and I can do my best if not?
Yeah, could you reread the question? Sorry, I was answering other ones.
Sure.
No.
What controls or privacy are enforced around information included in the proposal submissions?
Yeah, so all of the proposal submissions are on the DSIP portal. So they're all secured at IL4. So that's government for any proprietary information. It's can handle, basically you're looking at the basic encryption. So if you're submitting a proposal and you're worried about it getting hacked, it's the standard security on all government systems is the level of security on the proposal site.
Yeah, and that's helpful. And also just from a workflow perspective, I mean, every one of our peer review team that ends up seeing any metadata or proposal information is signed a non-disclosure agreement with us with specific rules. Everyone gets procurement integrity briefings and training on this stuff. So it's handled very carefully. We take it very seriously. And as Joey just mentioned, the systems that we use are approved for that specific type of information that they're secured on.
Is it possible to collaborate on the proposed project with researchers from AFRL?
Oh, this is a question where I think the answer is no. So we're going to have to follow up on this one. That'll be a question that I make sure is addressed by the contract officer who couldn't join in today. But I do know that there's also a program called STTR, which is specifically has to do with there's work that is being shared among universities, and it calls out national laboratories as well. But for SBIR, I don't know the answer, and I don't want to give you the wrong info. So, Joey, can we mark that as a follow-up one?
I will when I find it, yes.
Thanks.
We seem to get a lot of questions on what exactly is an Air Force customer versus an end user. Kind of one and the same, but and also, do they have to be at the Air Force?
So there's well, I also want to clarify that though they are similar, they're not the same in most cases. And so I'm glad you both bring that up. So the end user, and we try to spell this out. It's only a couple sentences in the memorandum template, but the end user is whoever stands to operationally benefit from your solution. Right. So if it's someone in a laboratory, it's someone, it is a piece of equipment that they can use in the execution of their laboratory mission. Right. If it's a pilot, it's something they can use in the execution of their flying mission or any other career field across the Air Force. Right. So the end user benefits from the solution. The customer is whoever is responsible for acquiring that solution on the end user's behalf. And they're not always the same. In fact, most of the time they're not. We have a construct within the Air Force and the government called program offices. And there's many program offices under these bigger things called program executive offices or PEOs. But the long story short there is these program offices will be created for a certain weapon system or purpose, and they are responsible for acquiring and doing a number of different functions for certain items that are then used by the end users. And I get that this is complicated. It continues to be so for us in that there's over 400 programs in the Air Force, but this is a conversation that you have with your end user if you're talking to them. So if you're talking to someone who wants your solution, you can say, hey, who acquires this on your behalf? And that's going to result in dialogue that ultimately leads to, well, if phase 2 works, then who's going to be the one that can make the decision to buy this solution for me? And that's very helpful. Our goal with all of this is to increase your hit rate, increase the rate of transition such that these actually, again, don't sit on the shelf, but get used by the operator in some way. And part of that is understanding what is our strategy and who needs to be involved to acquire this at the end of the day. That's why we ask for both.
What do you consider within 90 days of receiving award? Is the date of signing the contract with you or receiving money, or the date when we get an email that we got selected?
Good question. So awards is a specific thing. It's when the contract was signed, right? When was it actually executed? So it's not when you get paid. It's not when you're notified. It's the signing of the contract for phase 2. And again, this question was in reference to the private investment only, which is that up to 90 days after to receive confirmation of the private investment. I just want to clarify that again, that for government matching funds that you would like to be included on this contract and recognized as part of the evaluation, if you look at section 6 again, that is within 30 days of the close of the solicitation. So April 30th plus 30 days.
To confirm, if you have a signed MOU for 19.3 direct to phase 2, that same MOU can be used for 20.R with or without amendment, although encouraged if possible?
No, the answer to that is, so you're saying that you went through a previous 19.3. Can you use the MOU that you had from back then to count as this one here? So this is something where realize that it doesn't specifically address this in the solicitation. And I don't want to think about the right way to do this. I don't want your Air Force customer to be blindsided by the fact that something they signed a long time ago is being used now, right? Or you know, at a previous time. So also realize that those two items that I pointed out that are different between the 19.3 that we had previously erroneously published and the 20.R, which is correct, that is published now. The two big differences are those matching funds. So again, you're saying, hey, if I don't have matching, does it not apply? And then also the milestones where we said 10 versus 15. So my request here would be, if this was any time that it's not that 20.R template that we have said you need to use, only in cases that it was already signed. If you don't have it signed yet, use the current template. Don't go back and use an old one. But if it was already signed, then I still want to get your TPOC or the signatory on, one of the signatories on that old customer memorandum to recognize that there is a new template and say, hey, this does not affect our plan to work with the company. We are still interested. So it's a really good question. It made me think for a little bit. But if you were back in a previous program that had a signed customer memorandum, and specifically I'm talking 19.3, if you have an older customer memorandum, no, absolutely go get a new one. But for 19.3, since it was relatively recent, and that happens to be the one that we published erroneously in the beginning on the DSIP portal, then we will accept it, but with those caveats that you have some type of acknowledgement or addendum to that says it still stands and it is not affected by the fact that there are changes between those two documents.
Can this be commercial customer money that we match, or can it only be VC money?
Commercial customer money. Good question. So again, I want you to read through section 9 in terms of what counts as matching funds. But, you know, high level, for private matching funds, what counts, there's 4 rules that are kind of the litmus test. And again, read through all the rules yourself too. But the first is that it needs to be cash. So we do not acknowledge in-kind investments for this. 2 is that it cannot be repaid in cash, i.e. it's not just a loan. 3 is that it needs to be in some way aimed at decreasing the commercialization or technical risk of the solution, right? And so this, the reason that this is a rule is it can't just be, you can't point to sales of your product and call that matching, right? So this needs to be funding that's coming in for the purpose of buying down your technical or commercial risk in some way. And then the 4th is that it cannot come from an affiliate. So you can't invest in yourself, or someone that owns a majority share cannot invest in you. The affiliate rules are discussed in section 9, so please do read those. But those are like the 4 high-level rules there. And what you described as, does it have to be like a VC-type investment? No, absolutely not. Nowhere do we say that. So it could be, as long as it meets those 4 rules, an investment from another private source.
In the milestone schedule, do the AFWERX money need to be broken out from MAGCOM funding by CLIN? I.e., do we need to show CLIN 1 X amount dollars, AFWERX X amount dollars, MAGCOM total amount dollars?
Yeah, so I'd like to see when the funding is coming from MAGCOM in this example, that their funds, you just identify which of those funds are being used on. Now for the AFWERX one, we'll assume that everything else that is not attributed to one of those matching customers is using SBIR funds.
In the customer memorandum, is there a list of the required components to include in the new section named Attachment to Non-Proprietary Work Plan? The description currently in the customer memorandum does not define these requirements.
Yeah, so I've got, let me pull that up right now. This is a good question. So it does, it describes them broadly. One thing is when you look at the actual, what we asked for in the work plan, which is discussed in the solicitation itself, what we're saying there is take what you put in there, but ensure that there is a non-proprietary version that is on that customer memorandum. And part of the reason for this too is that there was the fear previously, which I think was valid, that if an Air Force customer signed a memorandum with you with certain expectations on what was going to happen, but then in your work plan you described a different thing, then there was the opportunity for, I hate assuming the worst of people, but for fraud where the customer said, we thought we were getting one thing, but what you're proposing is different. And then you, based on whatever's in the contract, that work plan is then what is going to be the source that is referenced in the contract itself. And so we didn't want that happening. And so the workaround was, one, if it is an attachment on that memorandum and it's signed by your Air Force customer, they're acknowledging that this is what they're putting in the proposal. And we can just compare the two and say, hey, this isn't different. This is different from what you put in your proposal. Something's fishy here. So that's one. Two is when we actually publish your contract or we sign your contract, we need a non-proprietary version to have in there anyway, because this is going to become subject to Freedom of Information Act. We don't want proprietary information to be publicly accessible if needed. And so we say we need to have something non-proprietary. And that's why, that's reason two for putting it in there. But let me pull this up right now. These are great questions. And we've got about 3 minutes left. This has been very effective. And I appreciate all the good questions. Scroll down. So if you look at, the attachment on non-proprietary work plan, here's what we say. So the intent of having this section and the memorandum is to allow for Air Force stakeholders to see the work plan, just like we talked about, and avoiding a scenario where they sign the memorandum based on a deliverable schedule, only to have the details surrounding that work changed in the work plan. This also allows us to easily incorporate the work plan into the subsequent award of the phase two. So the two things essentially I just talked about, that is all that is actually in the customer memorandum to discuss that. But if you go to work plan, phase two work plan. So when you go to the body of the solicitation, beginning on page 25, it goes into detail on what actually is involved with the work plan. So just take whatever that is, ensure that it's non-proprietary. That should be in the customer memorandum.
What is the advantage of the matching program? Do we need to disclose if we have outside funds that are unrelated to our response?
Good question. So the benefit of matching in this example is that, again, if you look at section 6.0, it's directly one of the criteria that we look at during our reviews of the proposal. So having matching, we have grounds to say this helps your likelihood of being selected. So that's the reason that it's valuable. And the other piece of this is, I'm trying to think what the second part of that was. Can you read the second half again?
Yeah, was it? Let me pull it right back up here. Do we need to disclose if we have outside funds that are unrelated?
Yeah, really good question. So the answer to that is no, unless it is, let me just make sure that is the case. I don't think we asked for that anywhere. Investment. Stand by. And again, realize, one of the things we reference in the solicitation is that, that money can help. So if you elect not to include that just realize you're missing out on an opportunity to potentially bolster your proposal. Yeah, I don't think we list that. What I'm going to say for this one is, because I know we're getting towards the end of this, read through and see if it says anything about disclosing your investment. If it doesn't say that, again, what is in the solicitation does govern what we expect of you. And so if it says it, then we expect it. If it doesn't say it, then that's something you don't need to put forward. Realize that there will come opportunities during the course, or there may come opportunities during the course of phase two for larger investments that we call phase 2Bs. For instance, we awarded the first round of the strategic, or rather we selected the first round of the strategic fund increases, which are very large awards, earlier this year. And if it does get to a larger point, we are going to ask for more due diligence and information on things like investment and deal flow and things like that. But those will be spelled out in the separate instructions. For this, the solicitation itself is the source document. Just look in there for that. Let's do one more question, and then we'll call it on this one.
Okay. Given the urgent nature of the COVID crisis, when does the Air Force desire to launch the services described in Focus Area 2 of Attachment 1? To how many individuals, airman dependents, does the Air Force desire to provide access to the virtual services listed in Focus Area 2?
Yeah, so that's something that I can't speak to, unfortunately. So both, I don't have the answer on that, and then two, I don't want to give any kind of peek behind the curtain on the specific things that we're asking for there. So I wish I could help more on that, but I do not know the answer. The one thing I do want to say here is, back in the very beginning, I'll show you this page. So you see the AFWERX website here. That yellow link that's at the top that says COVID-19 National Response Team. That has lots and lots of information on how to quickly get your solution in the hands of those who need it. There's a number of different vehicles associated with that. There's also some items there that discuss how, from the COVID-19 National Response Team perspective, they expect you to, or at least want to convey that you can leverage SBIR to get after that. But I kind of intentionally don't talk about that here because that is not a SBIR SBIR requirement. That's a COVID-19 National Response Team requirement. So anyway, go to that website. We have webinars there on every Tuesday at 1 p.m. All the past ones are posted as well, and you'll find out more information on that there. Okay, so we have reached the end of this. How many questions do we have left? Decent number. We will have another call next Friday. There might be a different dial-in, so as soon as we can, we're gonna post that information. Hopefully this one stays the same, but we'll post that to afworks.af.mil/sbir.html. That's where you'll be able to get to that. We're also going to post this recording there. I'm going to shoot to do that today. So again, the AFWERX SBIR page, I'm going to submit that to be posted on the DSIP portal as well. Just realize that there's a delay in posting things to the DSIP portal at times for this sort of thing. So check back to afworks.af.mil/SBIR for this video. And I want to thank you guys so much for joining. Please stay safe out there. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. I know times are not easy. And then James and Joey, thank you so much for joining as well. Anything else you guys want to pile on at the end for Joey and James?
No, thanks again.